Hey everybody, Dr. Dan here, and this is the ninth week of class, and we're on chapter 8 of the text that I am working on. And so this week we're talking about energy, and the reason that's important is because last week we talked about communication, and the week before we talked about transportation. And since we are studying the history of business in the U.S. and the history of technology, we need to look at these big infrastructures because these are the foundations on which everything lives. And certainly when we're talking about economy, remember we had to have the transportation systems in place or infrastructure, and in that unit we talked about everything from canals to the railroad to air travel and to drone delivery. So we kind of covered the whole gambit of what did happen and where it might go. And then last week we talked about communications and the communications infrastructure. And that was important because in order for businesses to grow, in order for transportation networks to work successfully, communication network had to be in place. So we started with Claude Chappé, if you remember that, in France, Napoleon's internet, and then we went right to the 1830s and the telegraph, and Alexander Graham Bell, 1876, the telephone, and then we started to talk about the internet and where things were going. So those were the two big infrastructures, transportation, communication. Now the next thing is energy. And there's a real simple correlation. Here's a guaranteed historical truth, and people will tell you that there is no such thing, but I guarantee this truth every time. If you see a society where the gross domestic product grows, business expands, the economy expands, if you find that society, you can guarantee that their energy consumption expanded at the same time. So there's a direct correlation between those two things. And so when we talk about transportation and when we talk about communication, certainly energy infrastructure is important as well. So that's what we're covering this week. And you know, an easy way to summary energy use in the U.S. is that we burn stuff. So if you look at the all the way back to 1619, all the way to the 1700s, most of the energy that was needed in this country came from burning wood. And you know, whether it was heating, whether it was industrial processes, or even in the home for cooking, wood was the main energy source. And it really wasn't until 1850s that wood was still used for sure, but coal came on board as coal began to be mined and used commercially, and coal took off as an energy source in a big way. And then if you go a little bit later in the 1800s, the first oil is discovered by Drake in Pennsylvania, and so the energy that fuels a large part of the economy starts to switch to petroleum. And also keep in mind, this is before the development of the internal combustion engine. It's before the automobile. So when oil was refined between 1860 and let's just say about 1900, gasoline was not a thing. I mean, it was a waste product, actually. So many refiners threw it away or burned it off. What they were after was kerosene, and kerosene was used mainly for heating and illumination. So kind of keep that in mind as we talk about this. So yeah, we go from wood, we go to coal, we go to petroleum, and then electricity starts to be adopted in the late 1800s. But keep in mind, electricity is really not a primary energy source. It only exists because of other energy sources. It's a secondary energy source. It has to have steam to turn turbines, coal to heat the water to turn the turbines. It's either generated via coal, or it's generated via natural gas, or it's generated via nuclear energy, which is heat again, or it's generated by wind, you know, as motive power, or it's generated by solar, which is actually a chemical process. So electricity doesn't really count in these primary energy sources, but the adoption of electricity in the late 1800s is really important as far as industrial use goes, business use goes, and of course domestic use, because all of a sudden, with electricity becoming our motive power, running motors in factories, our power in our homes and our power in our cities for lighting, as electricity becomes more adopted and there's a greater demand for electricity, the use of coal skyrockets because most all the energy generated in this country from 1900 to current times, well over 85% of it, if you take the total, was generated by coal. Now that mix is changing a little bit now. And we'll talk more about this when we get into our electricity chapter, but even your phone, so here's your cell phone, even your cell phone actually runs on coal because you charge it every night, and some of the power you're getting from your grid is derived from coal. So actually your iPhone runs on coal and steam to generate the electricity to charge it. So just think about that as we think about energy. You know the story. So we were at petroleum. It's discovered in Pennsylvania. The oil fields in the U.S. move west. So if you look at the early 1900s, there's Spindletop. That's like the biggest gusher oil field of all times. And that is right near Beaumont, Texas. You can go see where Spindletop is at. And then oil takes off as an energy source to do everything. And even to this day, outside of coal, natural gas generates a lot of electricity for us. So this same petroleum type scenario is going on. Now, before I finish, there's just one thing I want to read to you, and so excuse me while I take my eyes off the camera. So here we go. Of all the forces of nature, I should think the wind contains the largest amount of motive power, that is, power to move things. Take any given space of the Earth's surface, for instance, Illinois, and all the power exerted by all the men and beasts and running water and steam over and upon it shall not equal the 100th part of what is exerted by the blowing of the wind over and upon the same space. That is from Abraham Lincoln, and Lincoln, that quote's from 1852. And I think it's interesting because in this society, in the U.S., we've been thinking about alternate energy for a long time, and most people don't associate Lincoln as an advocate for wind. Now, he didn't know about electricity in 1852, but that having been said, don't get tricked into believing that renewable energy or alternative methods of power are new. They're really not. And I want you to think about that, because as we think about the lobbying power that the energy companies have, we can start to think about why research and development into renewables and alternate energy sources has always been sort of suppressed. So I just want to leave you with that. Give it some thought. Do all the readings for this week. I would appreciate it. And next week we'll be talking about energy some more, specifically electricity and how electricity impacted business and technology. Thanks a lot. Have a great day. Bye-bye.